Avengers Age of Ultron, the second big superhero team up, once again written and directed by Joss Whedon, starring Robert Downey Jr., Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo, Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson, Jeremy Renner, James Spader, Samuel L. Jackson, Don Cheadle, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Elizabeth Olsen, and Paul Bettany. We catch up with the Avengers as they're mopping up the final loose ends after the events of the first film and the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. As depicted in Winter Soldier. In the opening sequence, they storm a Hydra base in Sokovia to recapture Loki's scepter, which apparently was used for human experimentation and was able to give superpowers to two new threats, Wanda and Pietro Maximoff, the twins. After recovering the magical weapon and before returning it to Asgard, Stark and Banner decide to try and use it as a final piece of the puzzle in creating this global AI defense system, something that could protect humanity without the need for Avengers to exist. Unexpectedly, they manage to succeed, but the personality born out of those experiments quickly goes rogue. Ultron, as it's called, declares war on Avengers, steals the scepter, and begins his quest to destroy the superhero team, along with the rest of humanity. So, when the movie first came out, it had a mixed reception. On the one hand, it was still that well-tried mixture of action, humor, and personality that the Marvel movies have managed to perfect. It was certainly an enjoyable film. On the other hand, though, there were things that didn't quite work. The forced love story between Black Widow and Banner, the side quest that Thor goes on that doesn't really bring anything new to the story and only serves to kind of set up his next movie, Ragnarok. Some of the writing was wonky as well, but the biggest problem was Ultron himself. See, in the comic books, he was this cold, ruthless, menacing, calculating AI murder bot. In the film, he's basically just another version of wisecracking Tony Stark. That means he's not nearly as scary as he should be, and also his entire plan is basically dumb as shit. And it does make for a great spectacle in the final act, sure, but and also it was a great idea to tie in the origins of Vision with Ultron's story. But on the whole, it does feel like something is lacking here. However, the more I revisit this film over the years, the more I appreciate it for what it is. Because back then we tried to treat it, to evaluate it as a standalone movie, which, we absolutely should. And it was found lacking. But the key to understanding it is realizing that this is like the middle episode of a TV series. It's not the intro, it's not the finale, it's somewhere in the middle of the story, and as such it has a very specific role that it fulfills. Namely, it introduces, sets up, and develops a lot of smaller threads that would eventually grow into their own Marvel properties. Just to name a few things, this is where we find the origins of the conflict between Captain America and Iron Man, as well as the whole Sokovia fiasco, which is the whole setup for Civil War. This is where Infinity Stones are finally better explained, which leads into Infinity War and Endgame. This is where Hawkeye suddenly turns from the silly member of the team to a fully developed character. This is where Wanda and Vision are first introduced and instantly kind of paired together, foreshadowing what's to come. Even Wakanda is first mentioned here, along with the appearance of Andy Serkis as Ulysses Claw. So, at the time of its release, I think it was fair to judge Ultron as a fairly mediocre movie, but the more time goes on, the more you have to realize that this is the film that made so many later storylines possible because of the way it handled certain aspects of the wider universe. Also, it has one thing that is missing from all the other movies, which was often present in comic books, but in the films there is just typically no time for it. What I mean is scenes of superheroes hanging around together, outside of costume, not planning a mission, not investigating stuff, not going undercover, just unwinding after the superheroics and letting their humanity come to the forefront. Age of Ultron has two such sequences, the party at Avengers Tower and the farmhouse sequence. Both are now among my favorite scenes in the universe because of how wonderful they are in terms of reminding us that, behind those masks and costumes and powers, there are people who have their own desires and needs and a fair amount of trauma as well. And to me, tapping into that humanity of the characters is actually the number one reason why the MCU was so successful. Because if you think about it, dumb action and impressive effects you can see elsewhere. There's the Jurassic Park series, Fast and Furious, Godzilla, whatever else. But Marvel manages to center all of that, all the big spectacle, around genuinely likable and relatable characters. And for all the flaws that I'm absolutely not denying, in this particular regard, Age of Ultron certainly delivers.